Good morning and welcome to Heart with the Hansons. This is Monday, May 26, 2014, and I'm your host, Kristen Hanson. Today marks a very special Memorial Day for all the men and women who've dedicated their lives to fighting for our country, for serving our nation, keeping us safe, and retaining our freedom. This morning we're going to be discussing that and a few other things. If you would like to join us and share a little of your own story, you're free to call us at 480-409-0773. We'll be getting to the phones in about 30 minutes, and we'll repeat the number in just a little while. Joining me this morning is my co-host, husband, and best friend, Leif Hansen.
Good morning, Kristen, and thank you all for joining us this morning. We wanted to do something a little different today on our Heart to Heart show. Our show is usually on Sundays between 7 p.m. every other week, but we're experiencing such an increase in growth this past week, we decided to do a mini show in honor of Memorial Day for all of our new listeners. We'd like to thank all of our new followers on Twitter, Facebook, and Spreaker. Thank you for checking in on us and being a part of our journey. We appreciate you listening.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
And today's show, we're going to cover a few very important things. Number one, we're going to be talking about our childhood Memorial Day experiences. Number two, we're going to be remembering the brave men and women who have served this country. Number three, we're going to honor our family members and friends that helped build this nation and the ones that are no longer with us. Number four, we're going to try something a little different. Okay, we'd like to acknowledge the thoughts, beliefs, and actions that are no longer a part of us. Without those parts, we wouldn't be who we are today.
Exactly, and that's what when we came up with the idea for the show, we wanted to incorporate, obviously, honoring our military, honoring our forefathers and the people that fought for this country, but
Definitely.
Also honoring people that have fought internal battles, personal battles, because those wars are just as important as the wars that we've had to take on to have the country that we have today. First of all, you and I were talking about how Memorial Day was to us when we were kids, and I remember, being a child. I come from St. Clair Shores, Michigan, which is a suburb just north of Detroit, and we lived on the lakefront. It was a small community, but it was a very awesome community. It was very rich in culture, very rich in tradition, and Memorial Day was a very important day. We had a gigantic parade. There was all kinds of people, all kinds of veterans. We had a few veterans war memorials. In fact, the park in our city was named Memorial Park. And after the parade, there's always be like a big picnic, and they'd have the 21 gun salute and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
But aside from that, too, Memorial Day always marked the beginning of summer. And if anyone's listening in Michigan, and you guys are probably out on the boat partying and having a good time, hello. It began, the ice was finally gone. It was warm enough to actually get out into the water and enjoy. And, for some people, it's, resorted to, a day of sales and a day of barbecuing. But more importantly, it really is about remembering.
And I grew up in Mound, Minnesota, the home of Tonka Toys. Hey, that was their claim to fame. It was a very small suburb of Minneapolis, a little farming town type thing. And the big thing there was, it was amazing, the patriotism back then. Big thing was community. Now, my father, he was big in the community. He owned the 2 gas stations in the community. And at one point in time, his name carried some weight. If you wanted your car fixed, Zeb was the man to see. But Memorial Day, it was a little more solemn. You had parades, but it was also when you started thinking about going into the lake. The ice usually was gone. I say usually because there were sometimes floats still out in the lake. And usually Mother was saying, no, you're not going in, you're not going in. Once she let me go in. And that was the last time I ever asked.
Yeah.
I jumped in the water, swam about 10 feet, hopped out on the dock, and had muscle cramps like you wouldn't believe. It was that cold.
It gets cold. And Memorial Day, like I said, it was just such a turn of events for summer. The parade, the people, and getting together. It was the first time the community was really together after, 8 months of freezing,
Coming out of hibernation.
Everybody's out. Hi, how are you? How are things going? So.
Yeah, it was kind of a wake up from the winter. You knew it was summer.
Change is coming, yes.
You knew it was summer.
So to begin, I would like to acknowledge our military personnel and anyone listening who is in the service or who has served our country in any way, on homeland or overseas. We are eternally grateful for your sincere service and sacrifice. We would also like to thank the families of the military for being supportive of your spouse, son, daughter, parent, or otherwise family member, for their dedication to supporting the process of freedom. For those of you who have lost a family member or a friend, we are saddened at your loss, yet grateful for their sacrifice in keeping our country safe and our family and well-being.
My hat's off to everybody in the military. People sacrifice so much of their life for the freedoms we have, and Memorial Day to me is a little bit about that. Just remembering all the wonderful things we have. I'd like to also acknowledge our family and friends that are no longer with us, those who have gone before us to make this country great. As Kristen knows, and some of you out there don't, on both sides, a couple of generations back, I wasn't even in this country. My grandparents on my mother's side came from Malta. And back then, people came to this country, they learned English, and they became part of the community. They had pride.
Yes.
They wanted to become Americans. That's why my grandfather came over here at age 16 with a few dollars in his pocket. And, well, you might find someone over there that you know, and they might be Maltese. You might be able to bunk with them type thing.
Well, that's it. People came from overseas, and they were proud to be here. They were proud to be Americans. They couldn't wait to get here. They sold everything they had. They threw their children on a boat to get them across here, and they stayed here by themselves.
And they saved their pennies. They came over, and they raised their families here. But it was their shot at the American dream. Back then people didn't complain either. They just did what they had to do.
Right.
It was a culture of doers. They helped each other. They worked together, and they supported the family. Men went to work in sometimes horrible conditions. I know my grandfather worked 2 jobs, and there were times when he would work a day job and then at night work in a steel foundry. It was horrible conditions.
Well, I remember my grandfather, my mom, even my grandfather telling me this story. My grandfather passed away, and he was well up into his 90s, and he had several siblings. And when he was growing up, it was in the late 1800s, in the early 1900s. His family couldn't afford to feed all the kids, so they would be farmed out into work camps. And he was a child, 7, 8 years old, and they were put to work on these farms to earn money in like these boarding houses for children. There wasn't, playtime. They had to work to earn their keep. And then in the summertime, they would come back to live with the family when the family could grow enough food and stuff like that to feed them. But they would go out, then they'd come back, then they'd go out. And people had a different type of work ethic. People cared about the things that were going on. They cared about the jobs that they did.
Exactly. Well, and keep in mind, the times were different. Now, keep in mind, my grandfather was born, it was either 1900 or 1901. So when he was 16, it was like 1916, 1917 that he came to America. He went through Ellis Island. And when he went back and got Grandma and came through, they went through Ellis Island.
That's amazing.
They saw the Statue of Liberty from the boat. And they saw that, everything you read in the history books, they did it.
That's cool.
It was
cool.
insane. But, back then, they did what they had to do.
Absolutely.
For their shot at the American dream. They did not stop and get angry because their boss yelled at them. I bet you their bosses swore at them, called them horrible names, because guess what? They were immigrants. They didn't care if someone gossiped about them at work. And Grandma had a whole story about, she worked in a hat factory, and they had a story about, that sort of thing. But basically, they did their job to the best of their ability, and they took pride in it.
Now, that was one thing, my father had always told me, too, when I got a job, always about giving 150% of the time. And that's how I raised my daughters. You go to work, and I don't care what your boss says. I don't care what anyone says. You do your job, and you do it to the best of your ability. You come from a long line of hard workers, and we don't complain. We don't gossip. We do what we have to do, and you have pride in the work you do. So many people today just throw stuff out there just to have it done. And that was one thing that made our country great, was the fine quality of things things we had. Furniture was furniture. A car was a car.
Well, that's when Made in
Homes
America
were
really
homes.
meant something.
That's when absolutely, that's when it meant something. And in fact, my daughter's boyfriend just had an incident, at his job or something, about, quality versus speed. And it's like, well, do you want the job done right or do you want the job done fast? Where do you draw the line?
And nowadays, they want it fast. They want everything, But, back then we used to live in neighborhoods where we knew everyone.
Yes.
We said hello to the people. We invited our neighbors over. We broke bread at each other's tables.
Sure did.
We knew the mailman, the paper boy, and the guy at the corner store.
And if Carol, if you're listening, remember the ice cream truck going down the... We had ice cream trucks. Well, I didn't because I lived on the water, but the kids across the street had the ice cream truck, and it would come around, and I never got to see it. And if I was lucky, my mom would let me run across the street, cross Jefferson, God forbid, go across so I could, buy a dollar ice cream cone in 1976. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, the corner store, the people at the corner store knew me and my cousin well because back then you could pin a note and a $5 bill onto your kid's shirt. You could send them down to the Tom Thumb on the corner, and they could pick you up a pack of cigarettes at 5 years old.
When I was younger, my dad was forever sending me across the street to get a pack of cigars. It was like, really? I thank God I was too young to buy beer because I'd be having to buy that too. And there's lottery tickets.
But back then we looked in on the elderly on our street. We used to watch out for our neighbors. We used to watch out for each other's children.
Yes, we did.
And if another neighbor member, if they scolded us, we stood there and we listened at attention because heaven forbid they tell our parents.
Oh yeah, because that'd be the best thing. You'd be, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, please don't tell my mom. Oh, Kristen Ann, you better not tell me. And I'd be just so freaked out. I'm going to get, because then what happens when you get home?
Well, for instance, when the teacher sent a note home, we would carry it home.
Mm-hmm.
We'd get beaten home twice, not once, twice.
That's the
once
thing.
Mom would do us, and then once we got home, Dad would beat us.
And that's the thing that I think that's really changed in our country too. One of the things that was really great about our country was our education system.
Yeah,
and teachers were respected. School personnel was respected. And now you have instances where so many people blame the teachers. I'm a teacher. My mom's a teacher. Your mother's a teacher.
My mother's a teacher.
And they were teachers through the times. And it used to be when children came to class, they would respect the teacher, respect the class. Now the kids come in, they don't care, and everything's the teacher's fault. Where instead the teacher would call home to say, hey, your child's doing this or this and that. The parents turn around saying, well, it's because you haven't done your job. It's like, excuse me? So we've really had a sharp shift in community and in our home life and in our nation and everything that we are. And it would be nice to
get back to the way things were.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get back to those times. Stop worrying about what a mess of a country we have.
Yes.
I ask that we practice gratitude this Memorial Day because so many people did so many things to give us what we have today. Just take a moment and think about that. Imagine if we could turn this nation back around and get back to the values and the integrity that we once had. Imagine if we developed all those skills that our ancestors had, that our families had, and that our community had.
It's so amazing to think if we could actually go back. We think we're progressing, and we think, and in a lot of ways we are. There are a lot of wonderful advancements, but as human beings, I think we've really gotten away from things that are important or things that really matter. Today we come home from work. I've lived in this apartment complex for 4.5 years, and I'm a very friendly person. I couldn't tell you one person's name on either side of me. You say hello to people, and they just turn around. And I live in a really nice place.
Well, and people are in and out so quick in an apartment. It's not something that builds a big sense of community.
So next, what I'd like to talk about, and this is the basis of our show, is we'd like to take time and acknowledge the personal battles and wars that we have waged as humans in order to become the person that we are today. There's been wars fought for freedom for our nation, and we also fight wars for our freedom.